There's many, many examples in my own journey of watching organizers start milongas and events, and then those events sort of dying out and people leaving tango and never returning. And it happens so much, and it's always very sad. It's tragic. Today, as promised, I'm going to talk about tango organizing. I get messages both from social dancers who are pissed off about something that the organizers do or do not do. And also I'm privy to a lot of the struggles that a lot of the organizers have and the complaints they have about the community. There are many elephants in the room, and one of the big ones is that there's a lot of burnout when it comes to tango professionals, especially when it comes to organizing. Hey, welcome back to the Tango Banter. I am Yelizaveta. Today, as promised, I'm going to talk about tango organizing. Last week, I bantered about what it's like being a professional in tango, like a professional dancer, but a huge part of the profession for most tango professionals is becoming an organizer of some kind, whether it's organizing events, big time events like festivals or marathons, or becoming like a weekly Milonga organizer or practica, or both. A lot of times I get messages both from social dancers who are pissed off about something that the organizers do or do not do. And also I'm privy to a lot of the struggles that a lot of the organizers have and the complaints they have about the community. So I decided to do this episode because there are many elephants in the room, I guess, when it comes to looking at tango and how it works. And one of the big ones is that there's a lot of burnout when it comes to tango professionals, especially when it comes to organizing. There's many, many examples in my own journey over the past decade or so of watching organizers start milongas and events, and then those events sort of dying out and people leaving tango and never returning. And it happens so much, and it's always very sad. It's tragic in some ways, like certain milongas that go on for years and years and have to shut down for one reason or another. It always hits the community really hard. And you know, since I've moved to LA, I mean, this happens in every community, but more recently for me in LA, I hear things like, oh, do you remember that place 12 years ago over there on this street? We all used to go there. And there's this nostalgia for these beautiful spaces that existed at some point, but had to unfortunately shut down. So I wanted to open up this dialogue about what really happens for organizers, what it's like being a tango organizer, and hopefully bring in a level of mutual understanding, perhaps, that will hopefully help everyone involved. Now, I myself am not a full-time organizer, and I've always resisted becoming an organizer because it's so much work. But I've worked with many organizers over the years in different communities. I've been on organizing teams for festivals and big events, volunteering, and, you know, just kind of seeing how things work behind the scenes. And I have to say that there's not any other example I can think of a service, a passion that somebody might bring to something, and how unpredictable it is in terms of the return on investment, because every organizer really works so hard to put on their events, and it is so not fair from their perspective when it comes to thinking about the attention their event is getting. In my own community in LA, there's a lot of discussion about the competition that exists now for us because it's such a high tango traffic area. We have so many opportunities to dance. There's so many events every week. There's so many professionals coming through every month. So we're kind of spoiled. And on the part of the organizers, every one of them really works hard to make the best possible event. But the complaint, I think, is universal for all tango communities, is that there's just not enough. There are not enough dancers, and there's competition for the attention of the limited amount of dancers that exist in the community. And that becomes this tug of war between the desire to just be part of the community and build and offer your time, and at the same time, you have to be commercially successful. You have to actually make ends meet financially. And that's really the biggest challenge for tango organizers, has always been and always will be. Now, I've seen many, many events and milongas come and go, many organizers come and go. And I'm curious if you have had observations similar to this. To me, it seems that the organizers that really succeed over a long period of time and can make their event successful over decades of time, so much of what they do is really focused on building the relationships with the people in the community over time. So it's rare to see someone just start a milonga and it being a success for the rest of time. You know, usually anybody who starts a milonga the first day, it's amazing. Everybody's there. And then things dwindle. People lose interest. And you sort of have to go through that lull where people stop coming and wait until they start coming again. And that happens in these cyclical patterns over long periods of time. And those people who can stick it out, who are there, regardless if it's 5 people or 100 people, those are the people long term who can succeed. But honestly, there's not much control you have, even in terms of your own passion for the project, because one of the biggest limiting factors for tango organizers is the space, especially in big metropolitan areas like a city like LA. Most people have to rent the space, and as soon as you rent a space to throw an event, you're at the mercy of more of the external circumstances. So if the venue changes their mind, if they raise the price, or if somebody else books the same time slot or something, it's like you're out. So the organizers who have managed to both have this high level of commitment and also own the space that they work out of, or have some sort of great long-term stable environment, like for example with Horacio Godoy, who has been throwing his milonga every week for the last, 20 years or something. And it's in the basement of the Armenian embassy. I mean, go figure. It's bizarre. But he's been there for years, and it's a great deal for him. But even he, who has been running a milonga for a long time, and he's world renowned, and people party at his milonga every night till dawn. Even he, in the interview that we did some time ago, said that he's not really looking to his milonga as his main source of income. And that's the part that's really tough for some of the organizers who get into this, and the reality sets in that the amount of work you have to put in considering the actual monetary payoff for that work, it becomes really obvious that you can't really sustain that level of commitment for a long period of time without. So there is a misunderstanding on the part of some of the social dancers, think that organizers make a lot of money. I hear this sentiment, especially around the discussion of big events, big tango events. Sometimes there's complaint about the cost of the event. And I've been one of those people who've complained as well. There's always complaining about how much it costs a tango. But there's a huge but there. The costs involved in running a big event and the commitments that the organizers make to run an event like this is insane. And most of the organizers that I've talked to over the years who run big events, they celebrate if they break even at the end of the day. There's been a handful of organizers who've managed to create sort of a cash cow where the event is just making money no matter what. It's been going and will continue going, and they just don't even have to do anything. Those events exist, and perhaps there will be more like that as we continue. But for the most part, a lot of the events that you might attend and think like, oh, this is such an expensive event, people putting it on must be, raking it in. It's really not like that. At the end of the day, it's not a real moneymaker. The people who get into that role of organizing big events, a lot of them don't even want to be in that role. This is something that I watched even in Portland when I was there, because I was on the organizing team of the Portland Tango Festival for a couple of years. And, at the time that I became part of the team, that was one of the times that the festival changed hands. And then it changed hands again. And then eventually it was kind of like, unless somebody picked it up, it was going to discontinue. So there was somebody who stepped in, but not like in the excited kind of way of, oh, I really want to be doing this. More like, if we don't step in, the event is not going to continue. And eventually this event now is no longer happening. Portland Tango Festival has not happened for at least a year, maybe a couple of years now in a row. And because of this very real challenge of having someone run it who is able to make it happen in the context of all these limitations that we have in tango, like the space has to be a certain way and it has to cater to a certain type of person, and then the tickets have to be a certain price, and juggling all of these things and the venue rules. And if you're bringing in professionals, that is a huge piece that is typically the biggest headache. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had around what a total nightmare it is to go through the process of inviting somebody to the States and handling their visas. And it's a whole like separate part-time job that you have to sign up for in order to do that. So ultimately, any festival or any marathon that you go to, most of the time you pretty much can bet that the people who are putting it on are sacrificing a lot more than what they're gaining. And maybe that's not the case with all the events. Maybe you have some examples of where it's different. I would love to hear. So go ahead and share with me in the comments or send me a DM on my social at IMSO Tango. So why does the burnout happen for tango organizers? I think that at the core of it, the main struggle for people who really fall in love with tango and then they want to organize and they want to give to the community, their biggest struggle is to have boundaries, to put boundaries down, to not say yes to everything, to not overextend. And over again, when I've seen organizers kind of implode and leave a project in the middle or have this kind of dramatic exit from the tango scene, a lot of times it came from these amazing events that had all this passion behind them and events that would draw people from across the world to attend. But the person in charge would end up not delegating, micromanaging everything. I still remember one of the events, the main organizer, the guy in charge, in the middle of the night was like restocking bread, you know? And I was a volunteer and I was kind of watching him, and it caught my attention just because I thought, oh my God, this guy, he never stops. He's always there. He's always giving his attention with equal amount of focus to each person. And at the same time, he comes over here and cleans up the mess that somebody left and restocks the bread. And so I was sort of in reverence of his patience and how much he was putting into this event. Well, little did I know that that was his last tango event. Like, I think it was the last time he danced. At least that was the last time I saw him dance. And it stuck with me because this is a quality that's not unique to tango. It happens in other industries, other professions. I've seen this a lot in body work. I've seen this a lot in dance, in yoga. Maybe it's just this feeling of love for the thing that we do all the time and we want to give. A lot of the organizers, when I talk to them, there's just this obvious passion for the giving to tango because tango is so powerful. So it's understandable that you would have this level of commitment from people, and they would just be prone to just saying yes to everything. But that's where the burnout ends up happening. And unless there is a stage that a person gets to where they can reclaim their autonomy and draw boundaries and set some limits and say no and delegate and really treat the project more as a business, which is something that I really had to learn the hard way. I cannot tell you how many failed projects and workshops and classes and milongas and practicas I've run. I've gone through this cycle so many times. I've started so many things and tried to keep them going. And every time, it failed, mostly because I was just immature. Some of it is just immaturity and you just don't know what it takes. The first time that I sat down with a friend of mine, we sat down with an organizer in Portland because we wanted to become organizers together. We had this project that we started that we started teaching together and organizing a milonga at our house. And it was going to be this collaboration. And we sat down with him to ask him some advice. And you look at both of us, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Don't do it." He's like, "Don't do it. It's not going to work." Like, he was so blunt. And he was one of the main organizers in the city, like one of the most seasoned ones. Did we listen to him? Of course not. We still pursued it and did what we needed to do. And yes, it fell apart. In that case, it fell apart because emotionally, I could not handle the interpersonal conflicts that began to arise, which, of course, as we know, tango tends to bring that up. So, the project folded, and whatever other endeavor I took on in tango, every one of them folded eventually. And I think it was mostly because of this quality of diving into something without looking back, without considering what it takes, just sort of going for it because you really want to do this thing. And then you're in it and stuff gets hard. And then you don't want to do it anymore because it's hard, because nobody's coming, because nobody cares. It's such a trippy process that it really pushes your buttons. So it wasn't until I really decided to treat what I was pursuing as a business that I saw actual progress. That's when things started turning around. And one of the things that I learned that you have to do as a person who's running a business is this skill of drawing boundaries and delegation and understanding your role and tasks. And, it's a little bit of that not very fun romantic side of tango. It's not like the creative part. It's more of the like kind of boring, dry managerial part. And I'm saying this with so much, I guess I'm so surprised with how much I resented working in retail back in the day. Back in the day when I graduated from college and I was working as a manager in retail, I hated every second of it. And I felt like I was trapped and I wanted to get out. And the feeling of triumph that I felt when I finally got out of the hamster wheel, the retail world, it was amazing. I felt so excited that I somehow figured out how to get out of it. But once I really got into running a business, I then realized like, oh my God, it's the same stuff that I was doing in retail and I have to do it now for myself. And from the sidelines, when I watch organizers who put on really successful events that last over time and they're able to, stay balanced and have both still the passion and the commitment, as well as the compensation for their time, the effort that they put in, that they really get rewarded well for it. That is what I see they have that's different from other organizers. Like there'll be organizers who are they're sort of, this is their passion project and they're just kind of doing it and they're promoting it on Facebook. And it's all kind of a one-off type of feeling where it's like it's being run by one person and lots of volunteers, which I don't know. We might have to have another banter just on the topic of volunteers. Tango is funny that way because even though it costs, most of the events you'll see there's a lot of volunteers. So the event itself is being supported by free labor a lot of times. And it's kind of an interesting little nugget about tango that sometimes rubs me the wrong way. I'm not sure why. So maybe we'll do another banter on this. Now, why is it that so many organizers don't develop the same kind of business mindset that certain organizers do? And I think that from my perspective, there is a internal conflict that a lot of the tango dancers in general, professional dancers, but organizers in particular develop this very sharp internal conflict that's very difficult to live with. And that is these conflicting realities, a belief that tango is this gift that needs to be gifted and that it should be free and it should be low cost and it should be available to everyone. There is this sort of idealistic belief for many people. On the other side is the reality that there are costs involved, that you need to make money. And so for a lot of organizers, it's very difficult for them to reconcile these two realities because they want to make sure that everybody has access to the event and feels included, but sometimes they also need to raise prices. And that's not a very comfortable place to be. And I know it causes a lot of anxiety for people who are in that role where they have to make these decisions. On top of it, organizers also have to deal with a lot of interpersonal conflicts that happen between people. And that's not something that a lot of dancers really think about because it doesn't typically come up, right? Well, you're not really aware of a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. But there's lots of cases when there is a conflict that develops between, let's say, two people who used to date. This is actually a real situation that I was told recently. So this couple, they broke up, and the woman started dating somebody else in the community, and her ex started harassing them in the Milonga, like being rude and doing, like, behaving in a way that was really uncomfortable for them. So they brought it to the organizer, asking the organizer to step in, and the organizer was like, it's not really my problem. I need to make money. You know, I can't say that this person can't come in just because you don't get along with them. This story is one of many, many, many situations like that, where organizers have to kind of take a stand. And whenever there is this existing, I guess, gray zone of treating the Milonga, or treating the event, both as sort of a charity project, almost like a nonprofit kind of idea, that this is something that everybody deserves and needs to have, at the same time trying to make sure that you're commercially successful, then that creates the tension and the discomfort that is amplified throughout the experience of organizing. So for a lot of organizers, at the time that they finally burned out, it's the combination of the financial strain of running an event and having to constantly fight to make ends meet, and putting other people first because there's this belief that, you know, you have to, you need to. And at the same time, it's the psychological strain of having to deal with interpersonal relationships and not being able to keep everybody happy. Because, you know, at the same time that you might have this belief like that tango should be free, it should be low cost, you shouldn't pay very much for it. And at the same time that everybody needs to be happy, that everybody should get the same amount of attention. Like, a lot of organizers think like that. And there might be something around the fact that maybe it's the personality types that's like super giving and wants to give a lot. That tends to be what I see a lot in body work, like people who are just very, very giving. And that creates that problem where you don't necessarily see yourself as a business. And the difference is, you know, if you think about going into a business like a coffee shop, there's this expectation that they cost, and there's a particular code of conduct. There's a clarity that's easy to navigate. With a lot of the tango events, there's more of a familial kind of vibe that creates, and I think it contributes to the cliquishness. So on the one hand, we like that because it's not so commercial, but on the other hand, then it creates this gray zone where some people complain about being kind of on the outskirts and not being so included, and other people get preferential treatment. And, you know, it's all a spectrum, right? You kind of have to find your balance with it. Ultimately, I don't know for sure what is the correct answer for each organizer, but the mindset from which you're approaching the project is probably going to be the deciding factor behind whether it's going to last and whether it's going to be successful. Now, a lot of my projects, as I mentioned, failed many times. I failed many times at many things. And one of the mistakes that I made, which I see a lot of tango professionals and organizers make, is this feeling that the success of the project when you first launch it is really dependent on the novelty and the uniqueness of what you're offering. That as long as you offer something very different and unique and novel, that is going to result in the commercial success. But those elements might come into play, of course. But ultimately, what I realized and kind of fought for a long time was this reality that it all is going to come back to building relationships over time and investing in the community over time. So an example of the opposite comes to mind. When I was living in Portland, there was a Milonga there that started. that was such a big hit when it first opened. And within a year, it was shutting down. And one of the obvious elements that at that point was already, I was learning a lot just from watching how much can go wrong just from this one aspect of running a milonga. The organizer was not very personable. They did not spend time with the dancers who came in. They did not dance with those dancers. If there was somebody coming in who was a professional, they would just hang out with them. And people started grumbling, and people would actually kind of complain to each other. And also online, there was some complaining. And still, that did not produce any change in the organizer. And so eventually, within the year, there was like a handful of people who were going. So this is an extreme example of this phenomenon that sometimes ends up occurring, where the organizer of an event where lots of people are invited ends up being somebody who's actually not very personable and does not like to interact with people, and very difficult to keep that kind of event going. And unless it's possible, if you are very business minded and you end up doing your marketing really well, perhaps you can get away with not being nice to people. But I think in general, what seems to be a trademark of the organizers that succeed and the events that succeed over a long period of time is this quality of like connecting to the community, building relationships, investing in the community over a long period of time. And those are the connections that end up resulting in a sort of support and momentum long term. I guess it took me many, many times to learn this, but even with, my small amount of organizing that I've done, I've been organizing my Chicas del Tango Practica for the last, 3 years. I started in 2021. So I guess it's almost 4 years now. And, when you first start organizing, as I said, the first time everybody comes, it's amazing, right? Then it's like people stop coming. And then it's like 2 or 3 at a time. And then another wave comes in and you have more people come in, and then it dies off again. The realities of organizing are that you'll always have a lot of enthusiasm at first, and then people are going to say, oh, you need to do it on a different day or extend the time, or they request a particular lesson that they want you to teach on a particular day, and then you schedule it and then they don't come. Or they want you to do a practice on this night because that's the night that they can come, and then you schedule that and they still don't come. There's no way to fight it. Some of the conversations I've had with organizers, they complain about this so much. And I hear all of that. I totally resonate with the frustration that causes, but it's like that all the time. And in every other type of realm, whether it's yoga or art or dance of any kind, like there's still going to be that part of it that people are not going to follow through. So you have to count on that. That's something, for me, it was really difficult to not give up when I saw numbers slide down little by little until I only had a couple of people interested. It was really, so easy for me to say, like, obviously, this is not something I need to be doing. People are not interested. I should just go ahead and change it. That's basically what you have to deal with as a tango organizer. It's a little bit like watching grass grow. It's so tedious. It feels like you're not actually making any progress with like things getting better until you've done it long enough and you see the reward, right? It does happen. It does happen when you put in that work at the front. But there's this balance that you have to strike again, because if you don't, then the burnout is almost guaranteed. I talked about this in the last episode. When I pursued being an artist and ultimately pursued being a tango dancer, the desire came from this feeling of like, oh, isn't it amazing that you get to dance and pursue your art and or be creative and work. Like that is your work as well. And that seemed like such an amazing thing to experience. But over time, what you learn is that it can become the thing that you hate because you give too much, because you don't have boundaries, because you pour your heart out and you don't get anything in return, because you organize the hell out of an event and nobody comes. And you get to this point where you begin to resent this thing that you actually love so much and you gave up so much for it. So as an organizer, as you're watching the grass grow and you see this ebb and flow and you don't necessarily know when the payoff is going to come, somehow that has to be balanced with your own love for this thing, like you keeping connection with that place of passion that got you started in the first place. So for me, I did get to a place where I hated tango. I mean, I've gotten to that place with everything I've done professionally because it's really easy to overcommit and just keep doing and doing and doing until you just squeeze every ounce of your creative juice and you just don't take the time to replenish and you don't draw the boundaries. You don't say no to people who want more of your energy. Like that's typically the difficult part of being an organizer, is actually knowing how to do that. Now, lastly, I'll just mention that organizers are key players when it comes to building communities and also somewhat destroying communities. There's been a lot of drama in your world, I'm sure, in everybody's world in tango, and that drama a lot of times it involves organizers on some level, whether it's organizers siding with certain dancers versus others or making statements about other organizers. There are many camps that develop. People become aligned with certain organizers and their milongas and don't go to other organizers and their milongas. And in the end, everybody complains about that. And we don't like that. We don't like how cliquey tango is. And we don't like, how it's so separated and there's not that camaraderie that we think should be there. And organizers play a huge role in this. And whenever an organizer ends up burning out and a milonga doesn't continue, the community really suffers. The effect of it is felt for many months afterwards. So it's important to realize how profound the impact is that the organizers have on the vibe of the community, on how the community ends up behaving, how people get along. And rarely do organizers really see the big responsibility that they have. Whenever it's worked really well, I have seen organizers step up and visibly support each other. This is a huge focus in communities in Buenos Aires. You might have seen this or observed this in other communities where certain organizers promote other organizers' events, and you see the organizers go to each other's events and dance and kind of visibly support each other. That's typically the model that works long term and is sustainable and helps the communities grow. There is the opposite of that, where you have more of a competition for the same students. So there's a lot of talk about how there's not enough people coming into tango, and the organizers are basically competing for the attention of the limited amount of dancers. And for many organizers, there's this anxiety that exists all the time about, I'm putting on my event, but everybody decided to go to their event. And they take it personally because they feel like they've been betrayed by the people who perhaps asked them to put on the event in the first place. But honestly, this is the kind of thing that we have to work around long term, because the reality is that there's always going to be conflict. And as tango grows, the more we can see the competition that exists between the different milongas as an opportunity to collaborate and support each other, the more it works. I've seen this in action. I've seen many communities benefit from organizers just standing up above the drama and actually doing something with their power, with their notoriety, and bringing people together. But most of the time, people complain that, oh, we need to get new dancers in, but then nobody wants to do that work. And I would say my challenge to anybody who starts a milonga, anybody who wants to be an organizer, the challenge is that. The challenge is to get new dancers in. And if you can be the organizer who creates an event that both provides a space for the community to dance, but also brings in new dancers, that's the kind of thing that's going to really support the community long term. Most of the time, the organizers, they're thinking about it as like, oh, there's a free night and there's this awesome space, so I'm just going to create a milonga, I'm going to bring in a DJ. But really, the question should be, how are we bringing in new dancers? That's really the big question for every organizer. How do we put our creative minds together to incentivize new dancers to come to the events, to dance, to connect? I think the organizer that cracks that question will be the most successful organizer in the community. All right, I'm done with my banter for today. I'm curious what your experience has been with the world of tango organizing. Have you tried it before? What was it like? Have you seen other organizers go through their trials and tribulations? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM and we'll chat next week. Until then, ciao.